Well, here we are. As you know from the headline here, we did get into the Museum of Fine Arts this week in Boston to go through the Asian department, the Chinese department, and it was absolutely great. I had been in there. I went in there last week to test out the camera to see how things went, and then went back this week to do a more formal bit of recording in there. Brought along a nice wireless microphone and so forth, and really had a good time. Spent most of the day there. It's a fascinating place. And a little background on the museum, if those of you are not familiar with it, it was originally established in 1870, which makes it one of the oldest museums in America, in Copley Square, located in an old Gothic building that was there, that was designed by Sturgis and a fellow named Bergham, I think his name was, or Brigham, and beautiful building. And then in 1876, it opened formally to the public. And most of the antiques and art that was displayed in the original Museum of Fine Arts came from the Boston Athenaeum, another great organization, now up on Beacon Hill across from the State House. If you live in Boston and you want to join a great organization, an art organization, join the Boston Athenaeum. It is one of the best reference libraries for art in America. It's an amazing museum, and they have a lot of great art in there itself. Plus, they have a giant. It's known primarily as a reference library for art. It's cultural things. It's beautiful, beautiful. But at any rate, the Museum of Fine Arts went along for a number of years after its opening to the public in 1876 in the old Gothic building. And then they raised enough money through the benefactors in Boston, because it's a private museum. And I point that out in the video, that they get no federal funding whatsoever, and they don't want any federal funding. They like being completely independent, and it allows them to do a lot of things that they want to do, and they are not forced into doing things because of strings attached to federal donations. So they run it all privately, and they have a massive endowment. They can acquire art. They can do whatever they want at this point. It's a really, really great institution. They have a lot of programs in there and educational things for kids and so forth. And the current location on Huntington Avenue in Boston opened in 1909 after raising a bunch of money from the benefactors and the Beacon Hill crowd and the Brookline, the industrialists from around Boston that had some wherewithal. And they gathered a lot of artwork. A lot of things came to their collection after it opened on Huntington Avenue. Then it became very, very serious. And a lot of the things you see in the museum were donated within 10 years of the museum's opening. To this day, they're still some of the finest objects in the collection, especially in the Chinese art, because the Chinese material that was collected then by Bostonians was some of the best of the best of the best, just absolutely superb examples, as well as European art and so forth. They were all in Boston. They were all donating things, and you'll see a lot of familiar old historic names on objects in that museum. Because these are generationally Boston families going back to the Revolution and well before, and they're still here, and they've been prosperous for many centuries, and they like to support that museum, and it's so great that they do. But this is a sort of a look and an intro, and then we're gonna go through the place, and I hope you enjoy it. All right, bye bye.
And this is the main entrance into the museum. This is the old entrance, as they called it. It goes up, and on each side of the staircase are these cloisonné pieces, bronzes, and so forth. The original entrance to the museum entrance right into the Chinese department. And this is the upper landing. And then, of course, you have these beautifully painted ceilings in here. It's very European, the museum itself, in its layout and so forth. It's quite attractive. And we'll take a look at those pieces on the way out. But right now I want to look at these. These are exceptional. This is a big garniture set, bronze, Qianlong period, and they're quite extraordinary. It's a complete set with the incense burner in the middle, and then flanked by a couple of pricket sticks, and then on the end are these vases. And to give you some idea, these are very big. They're probably 3 feet tall. The incense burner is probably around 3 feet wide. Spectacular size. And this is one of the vases. And I want to zoom in here to show you the detail that they were able to achieve in the Qianlong period with these bronze castings. Quite exceptional. All the way down, there's the dragon, and there's the pearl, and there's another dragon, And all of them have this dragon and pearl motif on them. It was a match set. All right. Go down, and there's the mark on the bottom, Qianlong dynasty made for, as they say. And then you have the same mark on the base of the garniture, of the pricket stick rather, and then you go up. Identical detail in the casting all the way up, just slightly different size. So you have to realize the meticulousness with which these were cast to replicate the patterns exactly, even though the sizes were slightly different. It's quite a feat. And that's the incense burner. This thing is enormous. It's unbelievable quality. And of course, perfectly cast. Perfect castings. And that was always the hallmark of Imperial pieces, in particular the Qianlong wares. And this set was probably originally in one of the temples inside of the Imperial city in Beijing. This was a set made for the emperor, and go in one of his many buildings. And then coming over, and here's the last one. And again, you have these spectacular handles on the end. Just amazing, beautiful quality. And then you have all this very, very fine casting. And when you look between these, you don't see any difference in the casting. It's as though they were all made from exactly the same mold, which they obviously weren't, because the vases are there, each piece is a different shape. And there's the mark on this one. They're extraordinary. And like all good museums, they have a nice plaque here explaining what goes on down here with a considerable write-up. And there's more on their website, too. And these were, let's see, where did they come from? All it says is on loan from a private collection. And there's a few people around I can think of that might be the owners of this. But it's an absolutely great set. Spectacular. The fun part of visiting museums is you'll often see two pieces that look very similar in form, but came from very, very different periods. In this case, the bronze on the left, with a beautiful patina on it, dates to the Han Dynasty, or 206 to 220 AD. And the one on the right, there's another Zun form, was done during the Song Dynasty, the northern Song, and it was made in dingware, this whiteware that they made. And when you move in closely, I'll get my shadow out of the way, there we go. This one is a particularly fine example, very, very fine. And what you see in this particular museum is that many of the items in the collection came to the museum early on in its first 40 years of its existence. You'll see lots of old names on here from old Boston families that had caught the bug of collecting Chinese art, and they had the money to do it, so they went in head first and bought stuff. The one on the right, the dingware, comes from the Hoyt collection, which was a massive gift to the museum many, many, many years ago. I didn't even say when it was donated, 1950, but it had been collected back in the 1920s. And then this one came from the, let's see, the Francis Wadron Fund. Okay, so this was bought by the museum with donor money. The museum is a private museum. It receives no federal funds, so it's remarkably well run. They're not relying on government efforts, government funding of any kind. This is all private funding. And you end up with some spectacular gifts. And then you have this. This is probably the rarest ceramic in the entire museum. It's a piece of Ru Ware made during the Song Dynasty. There are only about 90 known examples of these in the world. And this one was donated many, many years ago by the Coolidge family. John Gardner Coolidge donated this back in, did it give the date? 1951. And I suspect the Gardner Coolidge family bought this back probably around 1900. But it's one of the few examples in the world and is one of the finest, certainly the finest one in this museum. I think they have some shards in the basement, but this one is in absolutely remarkable condition. And very, very few of them are around anymore. When I say 90 known examples, I'm including shards and bits and pieces. Very, very few complete pieces of this quality. It's just extraordinary. Beautiful glazes, falls into the celadon school. Oh, and then around the corner, I meant to talk about these two Kongs. The one on the left is a very early one. It's a Zhou dynasty example, dating to about 250 to 1100 BC, but beautiful quality, exceptionally well carved, nicely polished, and good color. And then, of course, you have the Sung example from 2,000 years later. The form was still hanging around, or 1,500 years later. You have the Sung celadon. Beautifully done. This is an extraordinary example. It's nearly perfect. It looks, to examine it in person, it looks almost brand new. It is so clean and fresh. And it was donated in 1950, also by the Hoyt family. Okay, this is another, we're going to hear the name Hoyt an awful lot. I may not even bother mentioning it. There are just hundreds of pieces in this museum from the Hoyt collection. If you have old books on Chinese art, you may have a copy. It's a paper-bound book. I have it in my office of the Hoyt collection. It was published back in the 20s, I think, 1920s or 30s. But this is a really, really extraordinary example. Very fine. And now we're going to take a walk across this scrumptious-looking scroll. Then you have this massive seated bodhisattva here. Beautiful example. This one you see often in publications from the museum. And then coming over to here, you have more, they call them green wares, or more celadons. The one on the left, the lower left down here, is a reliquary in the shape of a stupa. It's an extremely rare Southern Sung example, and it was paid for by the Edward Sylvester Morse Memorial Fund in 1945. So 80 years ago, or 75 years ago. And again, it's one of these examples that is absolutely in pristine condition all the way around. Just unbelievable condition. You can see it looks new. And that's, of course, the problem with the reproductions, because the finest examples also look very fresh.
The light on your phone?
Pardon me?
The light on your phone is not accepted. No light at all. That light.
Oh, the little red light?
Yeah, and the flash. And if you
There's no flash.
I know, but I'm just saying the flash is not allowed, and the light.
Yeah, no, I'm not using a flash or any lighting.
Okay.
Okay, I wouldn't do that. I know. I'm a member, so I know the rules.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And then up here you have this really fine pear-shaped bottle, a great example. Also Sung Dynasty, Long Quan Kiln example, and this came from the Hoyt collection as well. Absolutely superb, beautifully done, all the way down, even lovely color. And then on the right, you have this covered jar with a dragon. This is one of the nicest ones in the world, for that matter. Very, very finely glazed. And this was bought with money from the Edward Morse Fund back in the 1930s. Edward Morse left his fortune to the museum, and they bought art with it. And that's an example that came along, maybe from C.T. Liu or somebody like that. And then down below here, you have another example from the Hoyt family. This really, really fine Southern Sung 13th century porcelaneous stoneware dish with a silver rim on it. Exceptional quality, very, very fine.
Please sit down. Everybody have a little music. We are in China now.
And this is one of the other ceramic rooms. It's full of Qing wares, and we're going to go through some of these. And over on this side, it's a long row of cabinets. And on this side are some very fine Ming examples, some of the finest examples in the world. Again, unbelievably great. In the middle here, you have this stupendously, beautifully done Zhende period underglazed blue and white pen rest. It's spectacular. It was gifted to the museum by Frank Maycomber in 1913. It's about 30 years after the museum started, 20 years later. And it's a very, very fine example and in pristine condition. And it's interesting because these are the kinds of things that were available at that time on the open market around China. It's when the great collections were started. And this is one of them. Dates to 1505 to 1521. And then to the next, beside it, is another Zhengde example that was came from the Edward Morse Memorial Fund again. In 1976 it was bought, with some funds from that. This is really, really fine Zhengde ewer with its cover. And to find one of these with a cover on it is extremely unusual. It's a very, very, very fine piece, obviously. And then next to that is a Wan Li beaker. These gu-formed beaker vases with dragons on it. 1572 to 1620, extremely well done. And this was a gift from the John Gardner Coolidge collection again. They were the folks that donated the Ru Ware. They had a major collection. And this was just one of the pieces. And this was donated in the 1940s to the collection here. 1946 to be exact. But notice the quality of the cobalt on this, so we can assume this was probably produced during the early years of the Wan Li period before the kilns, the quality from the kilns began to degenerate. But absolutely beautiful example, and that measures about 10 inches tall. And then over here, you have a very fine Zhuande tankard, made based on an Islamic metal form. It came from the Keith MacLeod Fund. It was bought in 1963 for the museum. And again, not an example you see very often. Very, very fine. It underglazed Ming and made in the Zhuande era. So it's a Marken period piece. Now notice the handle, the beautifully made handle with that little knob on the end for your thumb. But the quality of the decoration is just exceptional. And then hopping over to here is another holy grail of the museum, is this extraordinarily fine Qianlong period bowl. They refer to these as mallow bowls because of the leaf decoration. And here's the interior of it. Absolutely extraordinary quality. And when you look at these, this is why they have such a hard time differentiating them from the modern reproductions, because this one looks extremely fresh, but it's not. It's been in the collection since 1950, again from the Hoyt collection. But a very, very, very fine piece and in perfect condition. Stupendous. And then you move over to here. We have a Jiajing Ming example of aquatic plants and fish. This is a very popular pattern during the Jiajing period, and this was a particularly fine example, also of Marken period. This is a Marken period example, and Imperial ware, so it's beautifully, beautifully made. You come around to this side, get a good look at it. And then the last, in this particular case, there are many cases in here, but this is it. It's a Ming or Longqing period bowl. And Longqing bowls, Longqing porcelains are exceedingly rare. They don't turn up very often. And it is Marken period Longqing. So this makes it one of the great rarities of this type. Beautifully done, and this was a gift of the Coolidge family back in 1946. Absolutely great. And there's the rest of it. And you just notice how dark, how deep and dark that cobalt is. It's unbelievable quality. That's the real Mohammedan blue, as they say. And then at the other end of the hall, this same hall, I was at the other end down there, and up here you have more Ming blue and white and Yuan wares. These are actually all, this one is Ming, but the other two beside it are Yuan dynasty. But there you have it, this really, really fine made ping. This also came from the Hoyt collection. Extraordinarily good example. And right next to it, of course, is a very, very rare Yuan dynasty jar with generals on it. You don't see those very often. And this was also a gift from the Hoyt family. Like I said, the Hoyts gave them some great things. And this is one of the best Yuan dynasties jars in the world, of all of them, because of the decoration, the quality of the decoration, its provenance is impeccable, and the details are quite exceptional on this. If we can get in a little bit, there it is. And the banner with the script on it above. And then inside, You can look down and get some idea of what they should look like inside, interior-wise. They tend to be pretty rough inside, pretty rustic. That's fairly normal. And then over to here, you have the gift of the Cabot family. Mabel Hobart Cabot gave this. She gave it in memory of her father, Mr. Hobart. But the Cabots also had some great things. And this is a Yuan dynasty example also. Extraordinarily fine decoration. Now, some of the work on here, some of the cobalt almost looks Qing. It's so well done, so tight. And it's a light blue. You don't often see them with this tone. Most Yuan jars look more like that, darker, more intense color. This is a very lightly decorated one. Very thin washes of cobalt over it. And these beautifully articulated masks on the ends. Fantastic quality. Absolutely beautiful. And the Yuan dynasty base with the lappets with a slight gap between them. That's really the difference. If you see these jars around, if you want to know if it's supposed to be Yuan or Ming, the Yuan examples, the lappets are separated by a little space. And the Ming examples typically are not, if they have lappets. And then coming along over here, a very fine, super fine Qingbai Southern Sung bowl. This thing has amazing detail in it. And again, it was acquired by the Hoyt family and donated in 1950. But it was acquired back probably in 1910, 1920, originally into the collection. Mr. Hoyt was a busy guy. But that's a very, very good, one of the best examples, extremely fine. And then next to it is this covered jar. And you see Qingbai wares often. Sometimes they have a white look to them or a slightly greenish look to them or a slightly bluish look to them. This particular one has an unbelievable amount of blue in the glaze. If you look at it, it almost looks like Clair de Lune. And this also is from the Hoyt collection. But very, very fine. And it's incredibly rare to find one of these leaf decorated bowls with its original lid and the little loop finial on top. That's a heck of a package. Again, you don't see these very often. You see the bottoms occasionally in this form, but you don't see them with their lids, hardly ever. And then you have this example, a very fine wine ewer, Northern Sung, 11th to 12th century Qingbai ware. Very, very fine, also from the Hoyt family. And this bowl is quite large. It's a warming bowl to keep the beverages warm, and beautifully glazed all the way around. You can see absolutely spectacular quality, and has its lid, which is very unusual. And the food lion, the dragon with the food lion lid on it's absolutely adorable. Beautifully done, beautifully done. And the spout has a tiny, tiny, tiny nick, it looks like maybe on the front of it, but that's it. The rest of it's perfect. And this is very, very thinly done porcelain, and it was highly brittle, as was that, and as was that example. And then you have this. This is an unbelievably fine 18th century Mei Ping vase that was donated by one of the earliest donors to the museum, which was Denman Ross. This was given to the museum in 1907, very, very early on. And they're dating this to the 18th century, though it may look older. But notice the decoration. It's exceptional. It's reversed blue and white. So the decoration of the dragon comes from the white glaze of the porcelain underneath, and then the cobalt decoration was added over it to create the background, so you have some definition to the dragon and the clouds and so forth, and the waves at the bottom. It's a very, very clever technique. They started doing this, the first time this technique was really used was during the Yuan dynasty. On chargers in particular, they did this, and carried forward, of course, hundreds of years. And during the 18th century, they were doing them on these. And it's an amazing piece of porcelain. It's quite large. It's probably about 16 inches tall, and is potted extremely well, and was most likely, of course, made in Qing at that time. Beautiful example. And then right next to it is this, and this is a fascinating thing. Zhuan Wu is a Taoist deity. This was produced, I think, during the Wan Li period, according to this plaque, marking period. in the center, right there. And this was donated by Gordon Merrill. He was an interesting fellow. You may recall the Merrill auction that was held at Doyle's a number of years ago of Yuan dynasty flasks and vases and so forth. He had begun collecting in England while spending a lot of time at the David Foundation. And he got very much into collecting after meeting a few people over there. And they educated him and explained what he should be buying. And this was one of the pieces he bought. And he and his wife donated this to the museum in 1979. His house was in Manchester. And it was funny because you could drive by the house and the blue and white pieces that ended up at Doyle's, you could see them sometimes if the light was right through his dining room window in a cabinet overlooking his dining table. But this is an extremely fine example and in pretty much perfect condition. Very, very lovely. All the way to the bottom. It was a heck of a nice gift. And then we'll go along over to here. This is a familiar face to many of you. It's a very, very fine Chanchu Ping. They have two Chanchu Pings here. There's this one in famille rose with peaches, and then there's a second one beyond here with cobalt decoration. These are among the most sought after of all Chinese porcelains, these big peach vases. They started putting peaches on decoration and porcelains in particular during the Yongchen period, and then continued on into the Qianlong era. And this is a Qianlong example. And it's quite a big one, beautifully done. And this was donated by Dora Delano Forbes in 1937. An extraordinary piece. And if you come here to the museum and look, you'll be stunned at the quality of the famille rose enameling and the quality of the green. The enamels on this are so fine. It almost defies description. Also the flowers, the detail of the flowers. Everything on these was done to such a meticulous level. And then this spectacular coloring of the peaches. Absolutely breathtaking. Really great stuff. And again, there's a very nice, extensive write-up about the piece and the donor at the bottom. There are many donors to this museum also who remain anonymous. So often you'll see anonymous under things. Or this one just says, like the bronzes out front, private collection. And this is the Yongchen period, porcelain, underglazed blue, Marken period on the base. This thing is enormous. It's bigger than the other one. This one is bigger than that one by a good bit. It's beefier. And it's about probably 5 inches tall. This one looks like it's probably 25 inches or so tall. It's very large for one of these. And the glaze is stupendous. Stupendously even in tone. That sacrificial blue. And that beautiful big mouth with that white lip on it right there. Very, very fine. And then, lo and behold, you come over here to another one. This is another Yongchen example. Extremely fine, Marken period. And this is also from a private collection at the bottom. And fantastically fine work. Fantastically fine. And beautifully, beautifully done. There's some heaping and piling going on there in the cobalt, which they could do in the Yongchen period. But the depth of the color of the enamels are just stunning. All the way up. This is a beautiful jar. Beautiful, beautiful jar. Or vase. Excuse me. And amazing quality all the way around. And then when you turn around in the hall, you get all of these. And many of these pieces come from the collection of Paul and Helen Bernat. They were a Brookline, Massachusetts family. Paul Bernat and his brother were big antique collectors. And Paul and Helen collected late Ming and Qing wares, Imperial wares, Republic wares. And his brother collected earlier pieces, which we'll see in a later video. But here you have this very, very fine Hongshan Marken period vase that was gifted by the Bernats in 1971. They began collecting long before this, but they waited until the end to donate it. But this is a very, very, very fine example made in 1916. And notice the quality, the delicate quality of that dragon. Just absolutely amazing. And then it has this sort of rounded garlic mouth in the top. And then next to it is another Republic example, and this was also donated by the Bernats in 1963, an earlier gift, with grisaille decoration, but stupendously fine grisaille decoration. And for Paul Bernat to be collecting these in the 60s showed you how forward a thinker he was, because at that time, among many in the intelligentsia of the Chinese art world didn't think much of anything made during the Republic period was worth even considering. There were even books that said it. This obviously was untrue, and here you have a very, very lovely example of stupendous quality that is on a par with anything that was made during the Yongchen or the Qianlong period. And it was made in 1912 to 1949. And then moving over to here is a fine Qing dynasty, Jiajing era cup donated by Edward Warren Bernat in 1975. Very finely enameled. I believe this guy, Edward Bernat, I believe was Paul and Helen Bernat's son. I may be mistaken, but I think he was. And this beautiful, beautiful cup. 1796 to 1820, to the end of the Jiajing period. And then you come over to this very fine femme noir, sort of flattened vase, beautifully done enamels. And femme noir wares from the Qianlong period are pretty rare. You don't see them very often. This came from the Helen Coolidge collection. It was donated in 1969. But extraordinarily fine piece, and so forth. I wish they showed the bottoms of these, but they can't, really. And then there's another one here that's done in white porcelain, probably made in Jingdezhen. Yeah, they said it was made in Jingdezhen. It's down below. This is from the Paul and Helen Bernat Fund. So you have two very similar examples side by side. This one is Qianlong also. Made between 1736 and 1796. And then there's this. This is one of my favorite pieces in the collection. This extraordinarily fine, sort of almost salmon orange cup, Qing dynasty, Qianlong period, but with a mark on the base, but unbelievable quality on this cup. It just shimmers, and it's tiny. It's a tiny cup. It's like a shot glass. But beautifully done, just beautifully done all the way. And it's another Bernat donation. All of the next two pieces, I believe, are from the Bernats. And then there's this really fine brush holder with calligraphy on it. You've seen copies of these floating around. They fake them all the time. Here's a real one, Qianlong period. Let's see. And even in the paragraph below, it says it's one of the most important scholars' objects in the museum. And it is, with all that calligraphy, stupendous quality, just amazing, with that beautiful little blue interior. And then beside that is a really, really fine, this is a 1937, hold on a minute, the bowls, Yongchen bowls. Okay, moving on. Marken period, Yongchen, very, very nice. Underglazed blue, overglazed Dalsai enamels, or opposing colors as they were referred to. Nicely done. And these were also a Paul and Helen Bernat gift in 1975, but just incredibly detailed, and they're in perfect condition. That's the thing, with all of Bernat stuff, when you look at it, you'll notice that it's in pristine condition, always the best. And here you have this, and then They don't have a lot of Beijing glass here, but they do have this one. And this was also from the Bernat family. And it's a Marken period Yongchen white and red overlay carved brush plate in Beijing glass, or in Peking glass as they used to refer to it. Very nice, exceptional. Great detail. And so forth. And then hopping along over to this, we have a really, really fine floral design bowl done in the Yongchen period, Marken period, from the Bernat family. But again, one of these incredibly detailed bowls. All right, and there's a matching saucer with it, bowl and saucer. And the interior has this very soft, almost matte. Let's see if we can get the camera to focus here a little bit. Come on, here we go. There's almost matte finish on the glaze, and it's the same on the saucer. Extraordinarily fine and beautiful. And again, Bernat's. And then you have this. This is like the Bernat wing, I guess, at this point. This very fine Yongchen. And this is a bowl with bats and rocks and waves on it. It's a pattern you see. But what's interesting is the fineness of the cobalt, the blue decoration. The waves are very tight, very finely drawn, very neat. The bats are tightly drawn, very tight and perfectly dispersed around the exterior. And again, Yongchen, and this was donated in the 1980s by the family. A stupendously fine bowl. And then moving along over to here, you have these Kangxi period. These came from the Kimball, the Pickmans, and the Bradbury collection. There's three different collectors donated this, and the one on the left is often referred to as a peach bloom string vase. And this has a very, very extensive peach bloom glaze to it. You'll notice there's not a lot of white showing through anywhere. It's very, very even in its distribution. It really came out perfectly. And these are one of the 7 scholars objects that you see that were made for the scholars table. And this is just one of them, but the string vases are among the rarest. And this is a very, very fine example. And then you have, of course, another thing for the scholars table is the seal paste box. This is a very delicately one with very subtle color shifts. It doesn't jump from deep red to light red. It looks almost like light and dark clouds of red and pink all over it. It's beautifully done. And there's no greening, because often with these copper glaze wares, you see greening coming through from the firing. And this one doesn't have any that I can sell. And then on this, you have the water pot from the Bradburys. And again, like the string vase, this one also is fantastically evenly decorated. You'll notice the glaze is perfectly applied all the way around without any difficulty, any problem areas, no nothing. Just perfect. Just perfect.
How do I get to the O'Keefe and Moore expedition?
All right. And now on to this. Now, I had to re-record the rest of the audio on this because I did something wrong with the microphone and it interfered with the recording. So I may sound a little different till the end here, but I remember everything that was said, and we'll go through them just the same. This is the famous Yongchen Daotsai bowl, that's a saucer that's in their collection. This is another Bernat gift, and it is superbly done. And they've got it positioned just right so that when you go to the museum, you can really examine the glaze, and you see how the light is reflecting off of it, and you can see what an extremely fine, almost matte finish is in this glaze, as they call it. The Daotsai enamels are very well done. There's no thick areas. Sometimes on Daotsai enamels they get a little thick in spots and they get a little cloudy or milky in places. This one doesn't have any of that. They are absolutely perfectly applied, perfectly evenly applied, very daintily decorated, and an extremely nicely finished foot rim. And then moving along over to this, you have there's two pieces here that are sgraffato ground, one in blue, one in red, Qianlong Marken period vases, and the sgraffito decoration, the incise decoration in the red. We'll get to it in a minute if you don't know what it is. But when you look at the red groundwork on this, you'll see these spirals, and they refer to that as sgraffito. And there it is. You can see it there in the enamel, and it's very, very tightly, very finely worked. That's an enormous amount of work to do that. And on the copies they produce today, just as an aside, they're sort of sloppy and wander, and they're not well spaced. On this one, they were absolutely perfectly spaced and beautifully done. And you'll notice that the enamels stay inside all of their outlines. Everything is perfect, even, no mistakes. I looked at this thing for a while before I took the pictures. I wanted to really see how well it was done, and it was superbly well done. And so was this blue ground pear-shaped example, another one. And these aren't very big vases. These vases are only around 8 or 9 inches tall, roughly. They're fairly small, but beautifully done. And this is another one of the sgraffito groundwork in blue, and you can see it here. They look like, as they refer to it in Japan, octopus legs, with all the little spirals coming up, or the fiddle. They look an awful lot like fiddleheads on ferns, but this is also a superbly decorated example. Just amazing. Qianlong Marken period. And then over to this. This is something you don't see very often. In the past, in the videos, we've talked about miniature vases. And this vase is a miniature Hu form vase. It's only around 4 inches tall. And they were produced in the Qianlong period. But the ones that you see from the Qianlong period typically are fairly large compared to this. They're 10 inches to 15 inches, even 20 inches in height. This one is very small. 4 inches, with a nice even celadon ground with gilding over it. Beautiful famille rose decoration here. That nice turquoise wash over the interior that was so popular at the time, and beautifully potted. Everything on it is perfect. It's just so much smaller. It makes it really, really quite unique, exceptional. And then you get on to these. Most good Asian art collections, if they're lucky, have one of these. The MFA in Boston has 4 of them, and these are Kangxi period enamelwares that were decorated at the palace, at the Imperial Atelier, and they would form the bowls in Qingdechen at the official kilns. And then they would bring them to the palace blank, and they would decorate them there and then refire the enamels. And here you have a couple of red ground examples with those beautiful flowers. And these are not big bowls. They're 3 or 4 inches in diameter, fairly small, but meticulously decorated and extremely rare today. Extremely rare. Many of you know, if you follow auctions, the last time these sold, bowls like these sold at auction, they typically go into 7 figures. And here you have another one with a deep egg yolk, almost an orange toned ground. It's a beautiful color in person. I wish they had side lit it a little bit more so you could really get the colors. And yellows and blue are such complementary colors together. They really work. And then it's highlighted by these pinks that they applied. But the potting on all of these bowls was absolutely meticulous, and the application of the enamels, frankly, was just perfect. There's not a mistake on any of them. And this is the last one. This is a cobalt ground, or maybe you'd call it a sacrificial blue enamel ground with colored enamels over it. And here you have this lotus flower with a character in the center, and then you have those bluish green leaves climbing off of it, and they're gently shaded, so they have a very 3-dimensional effect when you look at the bowl. When you examine it in person, it looks very 3-dimensional. It's an amazing bit of art on this bowl. And there's that deep egg yolk orange tone again, like we just saw as the ground color on the other bowl. It was yellow egg yolk. Yellow is an imperial color, obviously, and that's this row that we've been going down here for a while. All right, and that's it. That was just amazing. And this is getting toward the end. We're getting ready to leave. And just so you know, when you enter the museum through the old entrance, as they called it, coming up through here, all right, as I've said at the beginning, you're flanked on both sides by some great objects, pairs coming up the stairs. There are the bronzes we looked at the very, very beginning. And here you have 2 life-size immortals described in the plaque as being brass. And I suspect that they're not brass in the sense that we think of it. They're probably bronzes that lean more towards brass content than bronze content, so they're calling them brass. But the thing that's so striking about these is the patina. The surface on these are on. There's two of them. Is absolutely phenomenal. It looks like paint. It's on there. It's got such a heavy green, verdigris green tone to it, and the oxidization of the surface just weathered perfectly, so that you have these light and dark areas that give it a very, very natural look. But the workmanship of these two bronzes, the facial expressions, the details around the eyes, the folds of the robes, and everything is just perfect. And this is one they think that may be a model of Confucius. They don't seem certain about it, but they think it might be. And again, because of the hat and the facial expression and so forth. But again, identically patinated to the one on the other side. They obviously started out life together, and are, I think, two of the finest Ming figure bronzes or metalworks in the world. These are phenomenal. These are absolutely phenomenal, and I don't know of another museum that has another pair like them. Maybe in a private collection somewhere. But if you look at them right down to the base, everything is so perfect. The knot in the robe, beautifully cast, no errors. The hands, the fingers, everything. There's no damage to these. They're absolutely amazing pieces, stunning, and they apparently are the property of a private collector. There's a streak of that through the museum with private collections, and some of the things that are there in private collections have been there for. These aren't here for a couple of months. You'll see pieces in here that are loaned from private collections that have been there for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. They often just leave them there and want the world to enjoy them. The benefactors of this museum are incredibly generous. And then we're going to head down the staircase here and take a look at a few of these pieces as we go out. The pair of cloisonne, the jar, the bronzes, and so forth. But just a little pause to look down. There's the outside world at the end of the staircase. And we get down to this. And this is a Qianlong cloisonne incense burner. It's meticulously done. We'll get in close and take a look at some of the metalwork on this. This is a fairly large one. It's 3 or 4 feet tall. It's a big piece of, or maybe even more. I don't remember. I remember it was very, very tall. I didn't have to bend down much to photograph it. But you'll notice that the enamels on the groundwork here, of course, of the Qianlong period, were the best. And the way they reticulated the metal and then gilded it is just absolutely amazing. The work they did on these cloisonne pieces, especially during the 18th century, was so wildly superior to anything they'd ever done before as far as fineness goes. And it's got that beautiful finial on top. And there's a mate to it right across the hall. Everything we're going to look at are pairs. And then you have this jar. Now, this jar struck me funny. When I first saw it, I thought it was an 18th century jar. I would have sworn it was. But they're calling it 19th century. And I think they're thinking it's probably Jing period. Because when I saw it, I was thinking it's sort of Kangxi style, but maybe is a very high-end Qianlong example. And there's the one across the hallway from this is exactly the same piece. This is a pair, and beautifully done with all these cash symbols on it and beautiful flowers. It is profusely decorated, and this jar is big. This jar is probably 2.5 or so feet tall. It's 30. It's got to be 3 feet tall, I guess. Yeah, it's got to be. It's a very big jar, and there's the other one across the way from it. So when you walk up, you're passing between them. It's quite a thing, and there it is. Meticulous detail, superb quality, and then you may remember at the beginning we were looking at that garniture set from the palace, and then going out, there's 2 very similarly decorated vases in that very similar style, but instead of having dragons, these are phoenixes. Which are, of course, the represent the empress, the dragon for the emperor and the phoenix for the empress. And these have the same quality of work as the ones we looked at before. Virtually identical. They had to have been made at the same, the same casting operation for the palace. Whoever did the others did these, obviously. And the detail is just stupendous. And they are both market period. And then going down a little more, there's another pair of massive cloisonne, Qianlong incense burners. And these are a little bit different than the other ones. They have roundels on the side of the covers. The groundwork tends to be a little darker, and then it's highlighted by pinks and yellows, which is a very nice combination. But look at the work on those dragons or chimeras swirling around. And then they have these massive finial on top. This is about the size of a baseball. This is a big finial with sort of swirling clouds coming up out of the top of it. Absolutely beautiful, absolutely splendid. It's hard not to want to touch it when you're there. And then it's got these very, very exuberant handles on the side, nicely done all the way down. And again, there's one like it just across the hall. And then we get down to the very first two pieces you encounter coming through the door. These fellows are great. They're a big pair of sunkai glazed Ming dynasty beasts or dragons or mythical creatures. They have the best expressions. They each have a different expression. This one, he's sort of looking at you with his lips pressed together and his eyes squinting a little bit. And these are quite large. These are 4 or 5 feet tall. These are big pieces, and they're in both an excellent condition. And this one is sort of tired look on his face. And then the one over here, he's got his mouth wide open like he's roaring at the sky. Again, equally done. These were a pair when they were made. It's pretty obvious they came along together, identically decorated, identical size, identical style. And there's a look up that majestic staircase. It really is one of the great museums in the world. If you have not been to the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, it's great because you not only see incredible objects that were gathered over 100 years ago, but you also see things that many museums will never have, only because this museum is just so old. So that's the end of it. All right. Thank you for watching, and have a great week.